Welcome to the Industrial IoT Spotlight, your number one spot for insight from industrial IoT thought leaders who are transforming businesses today. With your host, Eric Walenza.
Welcome back to the Industrial IoT Spotlight podcast. I'm your host, Eric Walenza, CEO of IoT One, the consultancy that helps companies create value from data to accelerate growth. Our guest today is Frederic Joye, co-founder of Arcanys. Arcanys is a Swiss software outsourcing company in the Philippines that specializes in building highly skilled teams of developers for tech-enabled companies. In this talk, we discussed how to build a high-performance engineering team, and more importantly, how to retain that team over the long term. We also explored the right balance between a core internal team and external partners, such as agencies or freelancers, and Frederic's concept of outsourcing 2.0. If you find these conversations valuable, please leave us a comment and a 5-star review. And if you'd like to share your company's story or recommend a speaker, you can email us at team@iot1.com. Finally, if you have a research, strategy, or innovation initiative that you'd like to discuss, please email me directly at erik.walenza@iot1.com. Thank you. Fred, thank you for joining us on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me, Eric. I'm looking forward to this chat.
Yeah, so I'm really looking forward to this as well. We were chatting a bit earlier, and I don't get to speak with Asian entrepreneurs often, even though I'm based in Shanghai, and you're not exactly Asian, but you've been in Asia for 14 odd years now, in Hong Kong and the Philippines. So looking forward to hearing your perspective on the ecosystem and working with companies from here and with teams in particular in this ecosystem. Before we get into the main topic, which is this topic of building technology teams, would love to understand a little bit of your background. So maybe first with the backstory of how did you actually, end up moving from Switzerland, that is, into Asia 14 years ago?
Sure. Yeah. So I've been working in insurance and banking for about 10 years in Switzerland before I actually moved to Asia. And my first move to Asia was through a friendship I had for many years since high school with Alan, who's my business partner in the ventures in Arcanys. So he's been an entrepreneur since very young. I think since he was 20, he was always toying around with business ideas. And so he left Switzerland to create his first business that was buying and selling game currency in online games. So like, EverQuest, World of Warcraft, and such games. He moved to Spain first, and then because of all the production of these assets were in China, he moved his business in Hong Kong. In 2006, they had a massive investment led by Goldman Sachs and other VCs in the company, and that went bust. So the company kind of exploded right after that because there was so much money at stake. And in 2006 or 7, he started another company that was not buying and selling currencies anymore, but we were buying and selling game accounts for gamers. So he started this new business. And in 2008, because of my friendship with Alan, I was like, hey, I'm coming to visit you in Hong Kong and just see how things are in Hong Kong. I was curious. I always wanted to leave Switzerland. And to my surprise, 3 days in after, a few nights partying, and then one morning he's like, hey, let's go for a run in the mountain, or let's go for a run in the mountain. So we started running in the mountain, and we kind of stopped in the middle. He's like, hey, do you want to work with me? And to me, it was like, I couldn't refuse it, because first, he was an escape plan from Switzerland for me, because I had wanted to leave quiet Switzerland for a while. And the second one was, this guy has built a massive business as his first business that got sold at a $300 million valuation in 2006, which were huge numbers. Now it sounds ridiculous, but back then it was huge. And so I was like, yeah, I can definitely work with this guy. If he's asking me, it's an honor to, so I said yes. And can you take care of the visa and stuff like that? And he said, yep. And 3 months later, I had one luggage and landed in Hong Kong. And we kept on working on that e-commerce venture, buying and selling game accounts, for about a year before we heard about someone wanting to sell a small business in the same industry in the Philippines. And that's how we discovered, the Philippines. We went there to visit the business, which was really super tiny, but as an interesting side thing for us. And so we kind of closed the operations in Hong Kong. And in 2010, in January, February, we had set up a business in the Philippines. But things weren't going really well with that e-commerce venture. Like the game industry had changed. So we didn't see any path forward. So we decided that we had to find another thing to do. And because we left from an outsourcing company when we were in Hong Kong to do our development, and we're able to hire our own developers in the Philippines and really successfully do so, we thought, okay, maybe we could help some other people. And actually, we had friends asking us to find developers for them because they were struggling. So we did that, and so that was an opportunity. And since mid 2010, we started focusing solely on building Arcanys, and 13 years later, I'm still in the Philippines. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this must be interesting for Alan because we started this kind of chatting before we kicked off the podcast about the reason that the first company went bust. And,
Yeah.
it sounds like part of it was cultural issues, right? Or team dynamics issues.
Yeah.
And now you're in the position of working, I suppose, with a lot of companies that are maybe in a similar position, right? The position of young, fast growing, trying to put together the team and the culture. And you're external, but I imagine that you're interacting with a lot of those challenges today.
Yeah. I think the IG part, I mean, the first business of Alan was slightly different in the sense where it was just about money. There was so much money, and then so everybody was trying to get some for themselves, and some were screwing other people. So it really imploded at the executive level. Not saying that with the companies we work with, we see these problems. We do see them at a higher level, but as you mentioned, we also see some cultural issues sometimes, and when we can, we help them navigate through founder issues, but also like more cultural problems or simple people issues down the road, because at the end of the day, it's just about, how to manage people in situations that sometimes really complex.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's a good differentiation, though, right? So, okay, there's certain issues that are really founder issues, and then others that are more team dynamics. So, I'd like to dive into that team issue with you because you're often in that process of helping companies put together their internal and external teams.
Mm-hmm.
Before we go there, I mean, you have a very interesting portfolio as an entrepreneur, and I think that also reflects, how you view teams and how you view culture building at your company. So, I'd love to understand that a bit more. So, your core company is Arcanys. Around Arcanys, you have Arcanys Ventures, CrossFit, the Early Learning Foundation, and then you're also involved in CoinUp and Sorrento Technology.
Yeah.
So can you share a little bit as an entrepreneur, how do you kind of manage that portfolio, but then also as a team builder, what's the purpose of building these ventures around your core business?
So with Arcanys, we have like 4 identities, if you want. And those were all historical, I guess, things that built up over time and that were close to our core values with Alan. And so the first one, so there's Arcanys where we, do dedicated teams for startups. Then we have Arcanys Early Learning Foundation, which is born from a passion for Alan and his dad around education, and also the need in the Philippines to have better access to early education, to get a good kickstart in school for these kids. And we target especially very, very poor families in Cebu, and through coaching the parents to show that they have a really high impact in their kids' lives down the road. And we do this through game cards for early math. And so we've got some funding from UBS, the bank, and some other big corporations to help us fund the program, but also do some scientific studies to show that the method we're using really gives a head start to these kids for the rest of their lives, and empowers the parents to do the same thing with the following kids they have. And we keep on funding that through Arcanys and some other donors. And our employees are funding it also through working out. And I'll link this to Arcanys CrossFit in a second. But the third brand of Arcanys, if you want, is Arcanys Ventures, where we help entrepreneurs getting ahead with their startups by investing work for equity. So we invest the time of our developers. And of course, our experience and our network into these companies when they're raising funds. We participate in the raise and try to, help them release the product faster or better product or new features for their users, increase the valuation, get them to the next round. And of course, trying to do this at advantageous cost, even in terms of like not giving so much equity out for the founders, right? And so to date, with the Arcanys Ventures, we've done 20 investments, with the first investment from 100 to 400,000 US dollars worth of value, and then we could have follow-on rounds. So the most investment we've done in one company is around $3 million worth of work, and we're aiming at investing in maybe 4 new companies every year at the moment. And the last one, which we just recently launched in June this year, really was is Arcanys CrossFit, and this is really linked to us trying to improve the company culture, but is also linked to the passion that Alan and I have for CrossFit and health in general. So it's health, fitness, good, life balance as well. We're very big on that, and we thought that adding this for our employees would also be not just being healthier and change of mindset, but also because of COVID, having a new place where people can kind of come and hang out without having for us to mandate the return to the office, which a lot of companies are doing. So it's kind of like a bit of a hybrid thing. And it's incredible. And through this, we also have incentives for people to work out. So every time they work out, they get a small financial incentive. It can be done on their working hours. So we also do that, give them half an hour 3 times a week to do this on their working hours. And then they also, every time they work out, there is a financial pledge that's made to the foundation. So I think we've raised like $50,000 in the last 18 months for the foundation through people working out, which equates to, I think, 12,500 classes or something like that, or coaching sessions for kids and their parents. So that's kind of like it for Arcanys. And on the side, I think when we chatted earlier, it kind of happened so that I got dragged into these ventures. CoinUp, I started it like I think 7 years ago with an idea to also in games try to help people gain coins and things like that. It ended up not to being that, but the name stayed. We're just focused on helping software companies that produce Chrome extensions to monetize their users. And I've done this with one high school friend as well, who one day asked me to help him out with that. And because of people we have at Arcanys, it kind of was easy for me to come in and help for technology and also finance and legal. That's the side I have for that company. And Sorrento, which I just started a couple of years ago, happened so that it's the partners of my partners from CoinUp who asked me to help them out as well. And so I said yes. And here we are. Yeah.
It's funny. Yeah. So there's a certain type of person who says, yeah, I got dragged into these companies and I've been
Yeah.
kind of running them for the past 7 years. Just kind of happened.
It did. It really did. But it's super nice because at the end of the day, we're doing things with people we appreciate. And so it never really, I mean, sometimes, of course, does feel like work. And it is. But it's when you work with people with whom you share values, you appreciate, how intelligent they are and how good people they are. But then it just makes everything easy.
Yeah, exactly. Right. You have so many hours in the day, and if you enjoy doing what you're doing, it doesn't matter. You call it work or you call it play, but it's just spending your life,
That's
right?
right. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, let's get into this topic of outsourcing 2.0. I mean, outsourcing is an industry that's been around for a long time, right? And it's kind of
Yeah.
evolved. I know you have a particular approach to it. So, how do you approach this differently than than maybe a traditional company might have? What's your philosophy?
So we're extremely particular in what kind of setup we work. So for us, it's like extremely human centric. And we work with companies who share our values around how you treat people and how you motivate people and how you make them, better people themselves by giving them the opportunity to do meaningful work, to keep on learning, and to feel like they're part of something, that's really meaningful to them as well as us, right? And so That's why we're very, very particular with the people who we work with. And the rationale behind it was first, whenever we add a client to our company's portfolio, it means we're strengthening our company. We're not adding problems. We're adding people whom we really want to work with. Just like I did with my friends, right? You share the same values, and that with that company, we know we share their goals, and that the people that they are going to work with from our team can understand their goals and value the same things. So I think it just starts at the value. And then our clients, they give us their trust because some of them, if they make the wrong choice of a provider, they can go bust. Like it's such an important choice they're making. So that's why we're also very careful on who we work with, because when we say, yes, we can help you, it means we really can do that. We won't let you down. So we do have a, very thorough due diligence on who we onboard, a very in-depth technical analysis of where the client is, trying to understand how their teams are working. And when we feel confident we can really make a difference, then we start working with them. And once we start working with them, what they really value from us, I believe, is to find the right people for them, because most companies that come to us is because they're struggling finding the right people for them, because it takes a long time. For example, if in Australia and Europe, it could take up to 6 months to fill a role. It's also sometimes a lot costlier than working with us, but that's really not the main reason. And the third part is the retention rate is pretty low in Western countries because people just jump from one job to another to get a raise after a couple of years. So the attrition rate is, I don't know, I think the last stats I saw in Australia was like around 20% a year, which is really, really hard because all the seniors in these companies keep on training new people. They train them, and 1 or 2 years after, or five, if you look at 20%, but then they're gone. And so our job is really to create an amazing culture at Arcanys for our employees where they feel like they don't want to leave because they got, of course, a good salary, because that matters at the end of the day. But it's not just that. It's like everyone cares about the people. We care about the people. We want our clients to care about them, hence the matching values. And also, we keep on improving the company culture and the perks. So, for example, the Arcanys CrossFit thing was for us to give, another avenue for people to keep growing aside of like their work. And what we've seen is, I think when we started talking about, so 5, 6, 7 years ago, talking about health and stuff like that, we maybe had like, I don't know, less than 20% of the company that was working out. And I think now, through all the initiatives we've taken, we've got around 65% of the company that's logging workouts. So we track that. We have an app, we send them smartwatches, and then we encourage them to work out. We also have dietitians on the payroll that are helping, people with their struggles around food, because that's a common problem that everyone's facing around the world, and so on. So we keep on adding stuff where people feel like we help them, grow whatever path they choose, right? So there's no obligation in any of that. But
So what is the average duration of a relationship with either your startup clients, and then your multinational clients? How many months, how many years does that tend to be?
so it's kind of forever unless the company goes bust or has financial issues, or it happens very rarely, but in the first couple of months of the collaboration, we'd see very quickly if it's going to work or not. So that's when we kind of end the relationships, when we see it's not going to work out. But once the 2, 3 months mark has passed, and even that is rare, but once the 2 or 3 months has passed, it's kind of forever, because our success only is guaranteed if our clients are succeeding. And the goal is, when we onboard a client, they succeed so they can grow their team with us, right? So if we do a good job and the companies succeed, which is most of our clients, it just keeps on giving. Like they keep on adding people with us. And so it's very long term. The short answer to the question is it's very long term. It never really ends.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's quite interesting that you're designing a company that can provide greater stability of a team than your clients can provide internally, right? Given,
Yeah.
the market conditions and maybe also, to some extent company cultures and so forth, because I think most companies don't think through these topics as carefully as you have, right? So that's a very interesting proposition to their clients to say, yes,
Well,
yeah.
yeah, I mean, you're right. And, our clients, their focus is the product or the service, right? It's like they focus on that. And of course, most of them think about the company culture. But our company, the company culture is the product. That's our product. Of course, there's the skills of the people and how we select them. So we have like high level people who are doing that. But our product is the people, is keeping the culture or building that culture where the clients then can look at us and say, okay, we trust you for this one. And then you are able to create stability for us. I think it's really well said. What you said is stability.
So let's think through this. If we were to provide advice to two types of companies, one would be a startup where their culture is, it's a group of like 6 people, and as they grow, then, they have to form that into a larger organization that somehow maintains, so they have some choice
Mm-hmm.
and it's kind of built around personalities initially, but they have choice in terms of crafting that. So that would be situation one. Situation two is, your larger clients like GE or L'Oreal. And so these are huge organizations that have already established cultures, and they might want to evolve that culture, at least in particular teams, but it's much more like steering a tanker, right? So
Yeah.
the change you can make is, so if you were to advise them on how they can build more effective cultures that retain people, that motivate people, I mean, especially in this, if we talk about corporate venture building, for example, here in China, a lot of the frontline people of our clients are dissatisfied because they feel like they're not empowered, right? Every time they do something, they have to report back to headquarters, they have to get their next round of instructions, and they lack that ownership. So there's things like this that larger corporates maybe don't think about. They don't think about, am I empowering and encouraging, these people that are 3 levels below me? These guys are doing their work, and okay, and then somebody quit, and we don't know why they quit, and now just replace them. So if you were to give advice to these two groups, what would that? Maybe we take the startups first. I think that might be a little bit of the easier one, actually. So how do you help to guide them when you're working with an earlier stage company?
Yeah, so I think rarely in a small startup the purpose is missing. I think when you're a
Hmm.
startup, you're on a mission to do something. So it's pretty easy to rally people around that idea, which is like I think a very important step for like younger people, right? It's like it's very important. I think the other part after that is, and that's sometimes missing in a startup. Yes and no. It's like the growth opportunities, like having someone to help you grow. So it's like through mentorship of like leaders or senior devs, for example, in our case, for like tech teams. And sometimes in some startups, the seniors don't have much time to take care of like the more junior people, and maybe sometimes they're a bit left alone, and that may be a bit difficult for them, and just end up feeling like no one really cares about them, or they can't grow as much and would maybe leave. The other aspect is the budget they have in terms of the salary. So younger startups usually have a lot less money. And when you're, younger and you want to, I guess, get a secure job, because some really want that and are not like entrepreneurs, they would leave for a better pay at a bigger company. So like in Australia, a lot of the startups, they lose people to banks, they lose people to Canva or, Atlassian or things like that. So, but if you manage to, I guess, create a culture where people, as you said, feel empowered. So giving them the options to learn, to make decisions on their own, and feel like they're contributing, I think this is already helping a lot. But at the end of the day, it also depends on what the people want. So it's kind of making the right choice at the start, is like also selecting people who are more interested in working with a smaller, messier company, or if they want something that's really, a 9 to 5 job and a lot of security, it may not be for them. So I guess the first step is to select the people with the same values and the same mindset. And it's hard because people could say yes to things without being completely truthful as well. So what we do at Arcanys really is because 40% of, I think, our employees, at least in the past years, were coming through referrals. We already had a bit of a like a filtering, and then we do a lot of peer vetting. So there's a lot of interviews going with their peers, and people assess also their likelihood to match in the culture. So that it's the first step is really people through the door. And then for startups who don't have as much money as the bigger companies, I think what we try to do is like looking for the quick wins that have a huge impact on the morale, on the culture, that don't necessarily cost a lot of money. So it requires a bit of thinking, but there's plenty of things to do that don't cost so much money and actually have a huge impact on the feeling of belonging.
Give me 2 or 3 ideas. What are some quick wins that you've seen had a big impact on some of your clients?
Like, so the Philippines is always a bit different than the West, but for example, for, healthcare for us, for example, is always a big question. We're paying healthcare for our employees. And some companies would, you know, give healthcare only after 6 months when people are regularized, and then they have to wait for another few months to have one of their dependents or the wife or whatever to be covered. And for us, we're like, it's a little bit of money, but when you work with us, from day one, everybody's covered in your family. It's you plus everyone else. So you don't have to think about that. Or we had, like, it's all these small incentives with the workout. So the gym memberships is one thing, but behind that, we also had education around that. So we're giving we had the Wednesday class, as we called it. So it's a 1 hour per week where I would talk about fitness, or Alan would talk about some stuff, and then try to help people through their journeys and have open doors. So that's like really caring about the people and showing that we're interested in their growth. And it doesn't cost any money. It's just it's maybe an hour taken out of work, but it's very simple to also transmit how much you care. What else did we do? We had depending on how it is, we give a half an hour 3 times a week for people to actually take that off work and then do an activity that benefits them. So health wise, we have bonding, like small budgets for team outings and things like that, where people choose an activity, they do it together, and they have to spend it every month. Otherwise, doesn't add up every month. If you don't use it, then it's lost. And then people would meet up and would hang out and would do things. It could be anything, like or groups who like to go bike, then we help them with that part. Like if you want to go on a ride or whatever, or if you want to participate to a Spartan race, we used to fund the tickets and things like that. So it's not that much at the end of the day, and then I think it just helps to foster the sense of belonging and having fun with your friends. So it may not work in every setup, right? And each country has very different ways to approach that. But in the Philippines, it's really this sense of community.
Well, it probably looks a bit different in every culture and, in every setup, but this general principle of if your employees feel like you care about them, they're less likely to feel, frustrated. And also if they have positive relationships, if they have friends, it's like, okay, you go to a place every day and your friends are there and you like the people there.
But that's it.
Yeah, then and if you go there and you have tension and you feel personal strife with people, well, then of course you're going to start thinking about, moving to another environment, right?
Yeah.
So startups, I feel like, again, it's a little bit easier, right? You have a smaller team, the founders maybe in the same office as everybody else. It's easier for one person to come up with an idea and say, hey, this is a good idea, let's do it. Corporates, it's harder, right? To say, okay, I've got to apply for budget, these things.
Yeah.
What do you think corporates can do to try to also improve, retention, improve team dynamics?
Yeah. So I think what I've experienced working for big corporates, so that was 20 years ago. But I think one feeling that a lot of people have is like, oh, I'm not working for a purpose. I'm working for the company to make money or something like that, right? And that's how it's been seen for a long time. So we are not in that position yet to be too big to not know people. But one thing that, as we have grown, because now we have around all in all, maybe 360 people. It's not that big, but still, you lose a lot of that connection. And there's people I don't even know their names. But we survey people a lot when we want to feel the pulse and when we want to understand what's going on. We send surveys. I don't know, maybe some months we have 2 3 surveys. It's like running a bit of it's not a democracy, but it's running a company where you constantly ask for the pulse and then see like what people feel and try to fix the gaps where you see them. And then it's our way to really have people talk to us because they trust also that we're going to do the right thing if we have the results of a poll. And so it's like listening, it's listening at a bigger scale, but surveying is listening to people by asking them questions and acting on that whenever we can. So that's like also one way. And after that, again, maybe creating some micro communities around departments, but I guess a lot of companies do that, of creating some micro positive cultures within departments or within business units. We see this with our clients. So there is a very strong Arcanys culture if you want, but every team from every client has a bit of a subculture where they're very proud of belonging to that subculture. They love their clients, and so they do things together as well. I don't know if this really answered the question.
Well, no, I think those are this idea of collecting regular feedback and doing it in an anonymous way where somebody feels comfortable. Because there's, often these are known problems, right? Like, what are the problems? I can tell you what the 3 problems are. Okay, but the VP doesn't know about this, right? Everybody in the office here knows about it. The VP doesn't know about it. How do we make sure that that person is getting it? And I think one of the reasons they don't get it is that a lot of corporates, people very carefully protect the relationship. So it's like, okay, if we're going to talk to the VP, the director is going to talk to them, right? But it's not going to be the manager or the analyst.
Yes.
And so, okay, the manager has the problem, but the problem might be the director, and the director's not going to bring that to.
Right.
There's a concept that, I don't know how much we should be looking to Elon Musk for team building ideas, but one of the concepts, there's a recent biography published about him, and one of the concepts that the author of that book was explaining was this concept of gap meetings, right? Where you consciously have one-on-one meetings with people that are 2 or 3 layers below the people that would be typically reporting to you.
Yeah.
And and I think that it's a very simple thing, right? But you say, well, okay, I usually talk to 10 people that are 1 layer below, maybe 2 layers below. Just talk to the people that are a layer below that and have a casual, have a lunch with them, have a one-on-one touch base with them, and you'll gain a lot of insight into what's really happening in operations, right?
So as we grew, we started cutting layers. Like, not every company can do this, but we try to keep the structure as flat as possible. So because in the past we saw that some managers, as you said, were like wanting to keep the relationship and creating some small fiefdoms. And so we got to the point where at some point, like, we had a manager that was really disliked by everyone. And then people were starting to wear black t-shirts on Fridays. And we didn't notice until one day, 10 or 15 guys just gave us their resignation. And we're like, what the hell is going on? And then we realized that it was the problem of that manager. And so we called the manager in. We had to fire him right away after talking to employees. So we did a lot of digging in crisis mode, right? And then we were like, okay, we can't let this happen anymore. So as we grew, we kind of restructured how the teams were functioning so that people know that when there is a problem, they can come to me or they can go to Alan, and we won't act necessarily on the spot, but we will do our investigation as fairly as possible, and that no one in the company has a say on someone's stay in the company, or like can decide to fire someone just because they're the boss. Like, this cannot happen. So we're creating also like this open door policy, but also a safe space where people, they're not going to be judged by their boss and the boss doesn't like them for whatever abstract reason. So this cannot happen at Arcanys. Like, that's something we really want to emphasize. Like, people are safe, unless, of course, if you make mistakes or you don't follow the rules or you dishonest, we will find out, obviously, because people talk and we want people to be free to talk. But this kind of like helped us remove politics in the company by a level that we thought was incredible. So we're sticking to that.
Yeah, absolutely. If you can figure out a way to run an organization with the minimal amount of politics, this is a huge win for the organization,
Yeah.
whether it's small or large.
Yeah.
Fred, I think it was a fascinating conversation around the culture that you've built. If folks wanted to reach out to you, I mean, I guess this could either be reaching out to you about the services that you provide or about the culture that you're building. I think also that could actually be a very interesting conversation. What's the best way for folks to get in touch with you?
Yeah, sure. So LinkedIn is the best. My name is Frederic Joye, and if they type Arcanys, Arcanys, they will find me. They will find me on LinkedIn, and I really love talking about culture. I think you've understood that, and it's really a topic that we're so passionate about. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Well, thanks. I actually picked up some hints today that I should probably try
Thank you,
to
Eric.
put into my business. Thanks a lot, Fred.
Thank you, Eric. It's been really nice. Thanks.
Thanks for tuning in to another edition of the Industrial IoT Spotlight. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at IoT1HQ and to check out our database of case studies on IoT1.com. If you have unique insight or a project deployment story to share, we'd love to feature you on a future edition. Write us at eric.walenza@iot1.com.